Titans, go!
Hello again, Titan Talk fans. Welcome back to Titan Talk, the Titans podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Charles Skaggs, back for the last time this summer in Doom Manor as we get ready to throw the curtains over the furniture, board up the windows, and raid the fridge. And we're ready to talk the Season 1 review, and I'm here, of course, with my Titan Talk co-host, Jesse Jackson. Welcome back to Titan Talk once again.
Hello, Charles, but I'm not the big deal. The big deal is...
You're always a big deal. You're the biggest deal.
No. Our big deal is our special guest host joining us.
Yeah, so if you remember way back here about around episode 23, 24, somewhere in there, we did a little Titans Season 1 review with a certain DJ Nik from Milan, Italy, and DJ Nik back in Doom Manor, ready to talk the Doom Patrol Season 1 review. So welcome back to Titan Talk, DJ Nik.
Hey guys, and well, I have to say thank you so much for the compliments here. I will give you a word of advice. It's not a good idea to give a DJ a big head. I tell you that.
Well, you have your camera off, so we can't see how big your head is getting.
Exactly. So. Right now, as I said, well, thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And I'm really looking forward to this recap with you. We had a great time when we did the recap for Titans, and so I'm sure this will be just as fun.
Yes, and of course, everybody, DJ Nik is the host of the Whiskey and Cigarette Show, which I hope all of you are checking out. And if not, shame on you. But he's always kind enough to help us out here and on other podcasts like Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast that Jesse and I do. So I'm definitely looking forward to this, and I'm definitely looking forward to getting Nik's take on Doom Patrol. I'd like to know what you're thinking. So just right off the bat, in general topics, Nik, what's your evaluation of the season, this first season?
Well, Charles, if you recall when you and I were actually talking Doctor Who last time, I did say there was a lot to talk about. I kind of gave a little bit of a cliffhanger there, saying there would be a lot to discuss.
Well, here you go. Here's your forum.
Exactly. Now we get to unveil that. I have to say, I was not expecting a show like this, to be honest. I mean, I thought it would be in the vein or similar to Titans, but boy, was I wrong. I mean, this was just... I could not probably even equate it to another show because it had a little bit of the 1930s movie Freaks. It had a little bit of David Lynch in it. It had a little bit of Deadpool in it. It had a little bit of X-Men in it, but it was its own thing. But I could see these influences in it, and I absolutely loved it, from the more darker moments to the very light-hearted moments too. I think it was a very interesting show, and I was absolutely blown away by this first season.
Excellent.
Yeah, well said. I totally agree with you. This was, I think Charles, because he was a fan of the comics, had a little bit more of a thought what it could be. Right. But as we've talked about, he has been over the moon of how well they have represented this comics and the series.
Now, Nik, I'm kind of wondering, were you at all familiar with the Doom Patrol from DC Comics? Had you read any of their stories, particularly Grant Morrison's run?
I have to be honest. Before the series started, I actually grabbed a few issues of the Grant Morrison comics just to get a feel of what I was getting myself into. Right. I'm not widely read on the subject, but enjoying most of what Grant Morrison has given us. Mm-hmm. I particularly enjoyed this because we know the guy can sometimes go a little bit off the deep end.
Just a little bit.
Yes. I mean, sometimes he does ask us to take some pretty big bounds in his stories. But in this case, I thought did reflect, at least the issues that I read, it did partly reflect what we got to see on screen, especially Crazy Jane, I think was very well represented in this particular series as compared to a comic counterpart.
Yeah, exactly. I think she was very well adapted for this television series. And Diane Guerrero does a masterful job with all those various personas. And I'm sure we'll get into that a lot. But she's a phenomenal acting talent. And obviously this is her big breakout. I'm sure she's going to go on to do a lot of bigger things in addition to this series. I'll be very surprised if she doesn't, because she obviously has the range for it.
Oh, yes, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I do have a lot to say about Crazy Jane, but like you said, Charles, we'll get into it. You know, there's a time and place for everything.
All right. And now, Jesse, one of the things that I know, obviously, we talked about a lot that you were coming into this kind of pretty much cold. You had read a few Doom Patrol stories here and there, like in the back of like old 80-page Giants reprints and whatnot, but you weren't all that familiar with the team. They had appeared, there was that kind of search for the Doom Patrol and the New Teen Titans where Cliff Steele, Robot Man, is found in the jungle and the Titans find him, the New Teen Titans, and then they track down the modern incarnation of the Brotherhood of Evil. But that was basically about it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Had very little understanding of what it was getting into, and just so happy that someone was able to make it accessible yet still weird enough to kind of embrace the roots. It was really well done.
Yeah, and one of the things coming at as a fan, I really appreciated was that they didn't just draw from the Grant Morrison era. They drew all the way back to the 1960s original Arnold Drake, Bruno Premani Doom Patrol run that started off in a title called My Greatest Adventure, and then that eventually became the Doom Patrol's first ongoing title. And the fact that, that it's incorporating so many different elements, you got a lot of, Morrison's run, but you also get like a little bit of the 70s Doom Patrol and, just little nods here and there. And and then also it develops its own mythos, and it's not beholden to the comic. It just kind of takes a lot of cherry picks little elements and kind of incorporates them into its own new mythos. And I really kind of dig that. So let's run down the characters and run down some characters. And Nick, this would be a great chance for you to kind of gush about your favorite characters of the series.
Well, I mean, it is a tough one to choose, but I think, we mentioned it before.
Do you have a favorite?
I do. Yes,
all right.
I do.
All right. So let's talk first. Now, obviously, we were introduced to the Doom Patrol in the episode, of course, The Doom Patrol, in Titans Season 1, Episode 4. The only real carryover from that was April Bowlby as Rita Farr, a.k.a. Elasti-Woman. And then we had kind of the voices of Negative Man and Robot Man, Cliff Steele and Larry Trainor, of course, voiced by Matt Bomer and Brendan Fraser in the Titans episode, as they knew this series was coming up. So let's talk about those three characters first, because that's essentially what we were kind of introduced to. And so Jesse, let's go with Nick first on this. All right, Nick, what do you think about the core of the Doom Patrol, Negative Man, Elasti-Woman, and Robot Man?
Well, they were very interesting characters because, once again, I've never encountered characters just like these. I mean, the first impetus that I had was possibly something that I could compare maybe to Watchmen to a certain degree, because maybe the strangeness and because the disenfranchised spirit that these characters have, because they already start off with the fact of we are not superheroes. which I think already speaks volumes about that. And I think and rarely do you get characters that are so deep. I mean, it's not just the hero's journey of, I have to save the world, I have to do this, I have to do that, etc. But there's so much more behind it, which I thought was incredible, especially when it came to Negative Man, because rarely do you see something on screen or a character portrayed like that who is trying to, one, deal with his sexuality, and at the same time trying to find his place in the world. That when I said there was a little bit of a reminder of old horror movies, or should I say particularly controversial movies, it made me think of, for example, David Lynch's The Elephant Man, for example. There was that kind of hint of that, I feel. So yes, and Matt Boomer and Matthew Zuck did great jobs on doing Larry Train. I mean, it's amazing. It surprised me that it was two people. That it wasn't, there was just the one person doing the same thing, the character as a whole, as it were.
Yeah, because in the case of Cliff and Larry, there's essentially a voice actor, and then there's the physical actor. And obviously we get Matt Bomer as the voice of Negative Man. Brendan Fraser does a great job as the voice of Robot Man, Cliff Steele. But we also get the physical actor of Matthew Zuck as Larry and Riley Shanahan as Cliff. And it's kind of a credit to both actors, I think, because one's able to give that physical performance, but the vocal actors have to match up with that and make it feel like it comes from them. And
it's very true.
So, and that's obviously done in post when they do the audio overlay, and it's a real credit to them. And I think in that, sitting there in that audio booth, that they're able to kind of merge the voice with the physical actor in that way.
Oh yes, I mean it doesn't usually always work so well, but the way, as you were saying, they match the mannerisms of the character with the voice. Right. It was just an incredible job. And moving from Negative Man to Robot Man, once again, the first thing that I thought of was Boris Karloff, because he gave me the idea of being much the sad Frankenstein. The very sort of misunderstood creature in certain ways that he moved in certain situations. And that was the first thing that came to my mind was Boris Karloff. And to be honest, at first I was not a fan of Robot Man, or rather, I should say, before he became Robot Man, because obviously, let's be honest, he's not the most likable guy. He's not exactly an ideal parent or an ideal husband.
But he's basically a bit of a jerk. He's a bit of a douche, and
he really is. Yeah,
and he only really becomes a better human being as a robot, which is one of the great ironies of his character, is that he's a horrible human being, but now as a robot, he's much better individual, and he's learning more about himself, and he's having more empathy toward others.
Very true. Yeah, and so I think he grew on me, because initially I was like, how can I feel any sort of sympathy for this man, seeing the way he's treated people and the way he's treated his family and such. But as time grew on and he sort of realized and underwent that metamorphosis, I really appreciated him even more, because the way he then ends up bonding with Jane, and there's almost that father-daughter rapport, and I really appreciated that. And so that was another character that really grew on me. And well, when it comes to Elasti-Woman, I have to say she was the one that annoyed me the most. It took a while for me to appreciate her, but she. Well,
really it was kind of hard. And then Jesse, you can talk about this if you want. That initially you had problems with her because you're kind of like, well, what is she doing? Go ahead.
Yeah, my biggest issue, and I is the not being able to control her body was getting irritated to me. I was like, okay, let's go. But I think they had a good payoff to explain the psychological reasons why she was self-sabotaging herself. It's easy for us, and I think I talked about it in the podcast, where, if you're not an alcoholic, just don't drink. If you're someone who isn't struggling with weight, just don't eat the chocolate cake. But it's not that simple.
Yeah, it's not that easy if you're the one with the addiction or the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a credit to the great writing in this series, that Rita's character goes such an incredible journey throughout this series. this first season.
Yeah.
When she starts off, she's very reclusive, like Larry, and she's all wrapped up in the past, her big movie star past. She can't let it go, even after all these decades. And she has these obvious serious self-esteem issues and guilt over the things like the baby story, which we find out later and whatnot. And there's just all this baggage that she's got. And it's keeping her from growing as an individual. And over the course of her major character arc is that she evolves from that reclusive, like, don't just leave me out of it, I don't want to get involved type person, into someone who actually becomes one of the major leaders of the team.
Yeah,
is the one who steps up and gets everybody motivated to do the right thing.
Yeah, and I do think, Charles, that this season they've done a great job of combining a couple of storylines. One, the idea of them getting from where every man is an island, we're not involved, we just want to sit here in our own sorrow and be sorrow, right?
Right.
And to where they actually get engaged and kind of are there for each other and there for the chief and other people. We also get the search for the chief versus, and I say this with great love in my heart, the Titans' first season really just felt like almost a setup totally. We had some story, but mostly it was, okay, how are we going to get this band together?
Right, and it seemed like, they were just trying, mostly, like you said, setup. It was mostly getting these pieces together, but we never got to see them really do much of anything,
right.
especially with only 11 episodes compared to Doom Patrol's 15.
Yes.
And it's only a 4-episode difference, but I think Doom Patrol, overall did a much better handling of getting a lot of disparate elements together and producing that story.
I agree.
Now, some of it, may be like completely out there as far as you're concerned, but there was a lot of there was a lot of different character arcs, a lot of growth, a lot of backstory introduced, and a lot of changes for these characters over the course of these 15 episodes, and it just all came together, in my opinion.
I agree.
Perfectly.
Absolutely.
All right. And we talked a little bit about Larry's growth. Larry's big character arc is obviously he felt very much the outcast because he comes from the 1960s. He was a test pilot, and in that climate, and especially being in the military, he was obviously, it wasn't a very welcoming environment for homosexuality.
Yes.
And he lived his life in the closet, and that's all he knew. And as a result, even after his accident, he just uses that as another reason to kind of isolate himself from the world and hide. And he has to be brought out. And that obviously is, I think, still a lot of work in progress. But compared to what he was here at the beginning of the season, compared to the end, and he goes through a lot. He ends up reuniting with his lost love, John, as an old man. And it's in a very touching, episode where he gets to say goodbye to John and kind of close that chapter on his life a little bit and come to terms with it. And I thought that was one of the more amazing things this series had done.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty actually of this. Another thing, the beauty of this season is the fact that all these characters are not the same by the time episode 15 is done, which often might not be the case when you're dealing with this kind of subject matter, because usually, okay, something might change slightly, but you won't have such a huge change in personality, in the way you view things, in just how you even perceive a particular character who, I was mentioning about Elastigirl getting on my nerves at first and being rather annoying because I felt she was kind of a bit hoity-toity and kind of very sort of uppity.
Yeah, right.
Once you find out why she's that way, and as the season progresses, you learn to understand that she's not trying to be uppity and arrogant. It hides. There's something more behind that.
Right. There's more to her. She's obviously has depth, and she essentially created that Rita Farr persona for Hollywood, for being famous. It's not who she really is. It's not even her real name, as we find out through the course of the series. And so, and part of her growth here in this season is that she has to come to terms with that and realize that Rita Farr isn't the person she wants to be going forward. She wants to be something else. And it's a credit to her character that she finally makes that change, and it doesn't feel forced. And one of the things I really love about this is that all these little breakthroughs throughout the course, they don't feel like, okay, we have to work this in. They feel natural. It feels like it flows out of the story, each episode, and each episode's circumstances. And a lot of the growth that you see in these characters would probably on most shows take like 3, 4, 5 seasons to develop. And here we get this in the course of a series, just a single first season, and it flows so naturally. And I think, again, that's a credit to the writing and the acting. Very
true. I mean, there's definitely some very concise storytelling, and just the way they're able to juggle backstory and what's happening now without it ever being jarring, but always pushing the plot forward, even though we go back to see how so-and-so became, the certain character. And that is also a credit to them, because I think, for example, was a big problem on Arrow at a certain point, is that whenever there would be a flashback, I would groan loudly, because
you and a lot of people, Nick.
As much as I love that show, but that was one of its big problems. Flashbacks can be a problem. With this particular series, it was not, because it was so flawlessly done.
Yeah, and then if you notice, compared to Arrow, every flashback mattered.
Exactly.
It wasn't just like, okay, we're going to introduce something and then we're going to tease it over the course, that one thing over the course of the entire season. If it was introduced in the episode, it got a payoff later in the episode. It mattered. Right. And Doom Patrol, I think, is a perfect example of how Arrow should have handled its flashbacks. In my
Very true.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We talked about, I originally was very unhappy with Larry, and I thought it was a little bit him being a homosexual, like, okay, yeah. Did we really need to go there? And then once again, I felt like, oh wow, they had a plan. There was a reason why they did this. Every flashback, every story lined, they were weaving together the story that they wanted to tell, and it's a really good story. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and it's Larry's story was coming to terms with who he is and being happy with that, learning how to be happy with that and comfortable with it, to be open, to be out. And it's obviously something that's very powerful and very relevant to today's society.
And, yes, very much so. I actually did have a question for both of you, though.
All right.
How did you feel about the profanity? Did you feel at times it was excessive, or did you feel it was fitting for the series?
I'll let Jesse answer that one first.
Okay, I was going to let you go. So what's kind of funny is it didn't bother me at all. I know there are people that, curse that much. So it didn't bother me at all. And then very quickly it became who these characters were. These are someone that, you've quite a little potty mouth. It's just without thinking, they're just going to say that. So it didn't bother me at all. I knew this was an adult show. I knew this was who those characters were. So it didn't bother me at all. Charles?
As for me, we had talked about this earlier in the season here, so we've kind of talked this one a little bit. But generally, I don't have the problem with profanity. As a writer, I'm encouraged to express myself creatively, and I'm not inclined to restrict or censor myself. But I do think, though, for some people, you can use too much profanity and you get numb to it. It loses its emphasis. I think a great, well-placed F-bomb can have a lot of impact, especially when
it's just a crutch,
versus just a crutch. Now, the one exception to that here, I think, is Cliff, because with Cliff, he says the F-bomb so repeatedly. He'll go off, like there was this great epic rant he had in the series finale where he's just going, the effing painting and the effing this and effing this, and it's hilarious in the delivery. And I think it's a credit to Brendan Fraser, because it's something that could be just so like tune a lot of people out, but in his delivery, it's hilarious. And just the idea that, okay, you've got this big robot guy swearing like he's, a sailor back in the, in olden times, and just he's just swearing up a storm, but it's kind of hilarious. At least I found it that way. Now, a lot of people might not, but personally, I thought it was, and it gave him his persona, and you kind of like. And a lot of times, now that you knew how Cliff would react, you almost kept like looking like something would happen, and you immediately look over at Cliff and you like, okay, waiting for him to unload with a bunch of F-bombs in response, because you knew how he would react to that given the situation.
Another thing I thought. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Nick. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead, Jesse.
So another thing I was thinking of, in early Kevin Smith work, there were people would complain about how much profanity his characters used, and he made the comment, "This is how my friends talk," and so I kind of thought of that too. That this is because you notice not all of them cuss that much, but it's Cliff and Jane a little bit more.
Right.
That is just. And especially depending on Jane's persona, but
Baby Doll doesn't swear so much for some reason. Go figure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Get out Hammerhead and you're in for trouble.
Exactly. Hammerhead gets a little tricky. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. But all right, so let's talk about some other characters. We should probably obviously talk about Jane, Diane Guerrero, Crazy Jane. Let's talk about Vic and Jovan Wade, and the Chief, Dr. Niles Calder, played, of course, by Timothy Dalton of James Bond fame, and lots of other great things. So guys, what'd you think? Let's start with Jesse this time. What'd you think of Crazy Jane or Cyborg and the Chief?
So I think that, and I think the reason this show is so wonderful is, depending on what day you ask me, I will tell you which one. A different person is my favorite character, but Jane is consistently. It's so much fun watching the actor perform. I love the different personalities, the different personas, and how wild that is. I've told you one of my favorite episodes is when we were in the underground and seeing all the different actors coming in to play the personas. So I love that. I love the while I'm a fan of her story, even though it's a horrible story. You do not want that to happen to anyone, but to have that explained and well it's done, and the reason why it happened is, while horrible, a great story. I think the Chief is a little bit of a jerk. I said that from the beginning. Yes,
I did try to warn you about that.
And and I continue to feel that way. I don't know if he absolutely was worth, having to go look for him, but they decided to. And then, you and I had a really interesting discussion about Cyborg at times can be very childish, but it's the relationship with his father. His father and him, it's a very complex relationship, and so I like that about them. He's not my favorite character, but I do think he is. It was him being in there was an important part of the show for nothing else, we wouldn't have covered it if he had not been in there.
Well, yeah,
It relates to the Titans.
Yeah, he's essentially our Titans connection to this. And because we get to talk Cyborg, and hey, he's part of the Titans, so yeah, it worked out really well. All right, so Nick, what did you think of these three characters?
Okay, well, I'll try and keep it as concise as possible.
Go for it. But the more you talk is the less I have to talk, and everybody likes that. So.
Okay, well, first off, when it comes to Crazy Jane, I thought I had seen some incredible acting work when I'd seen McAvoy in Split and in Glass, because I thought to myself, to be able to handle those kind of personalities and just switch it on and off constantly, that is the mark of a great actor. But Diane took it to another level. That was the whole. He set the bar, and she basically raised it. And it's incredible how well she is able to do that, because I'm sure there are not many actors or actresses who can pull it off with such panache and to the point where we believe it. It's not. It doesn't in any way make us feel. It's 100% convincing, and that's what I loved about it. Not to mention, as Jesse was saying, her backstory and the reason why she is the way she is, and why also her personality is very standoffish when it comes to bonding with other people, even though Robot Man does his best to reach out to her, but she continues to be standoffish for quite some time. And the idea of the underground, I love that, because once again, to make the connection to Split, it made me think of The Light, which is a similar concept that the character of McAvoy has in Split, where the personalities take the light. So, they stand in the light and you get that change of personality. But when we actually got to see the underground, my jaw hit the floor. I said, we're seriously getting to see the underground? I mean, it was mind-blowing, and I love that. Timothy Dalton, okay, I must admit, I am not a Bond fan, and I probably watched one Bond movie in my entire life. So, naughty me, but that's just the way it is.
That's okay. It's not everybody's cup of tea. That's all right.
But obviously, I loved him in Doctor Who. I loved him in Penny Dreadful. And I very much likened his performance in this show to what he did in Penny Dreadful. Because the character was kind of that father figure with a dark agenda. Yeah. And so I really love that. And I agree with Jesse. I can't have sympathy for this man. I mean, it's just like...
well, especially after the big revelation that we find out, he's responsible for all the Doom Patrol's accidents and their creation.
Exactly. I mean, at first, I was all for let's save this guy because he helped these unfortunate individuals to deal with their problems. Right. Then when we find out he is the creator of these problems, like, no, I don't think I want to save you anymore. And Cyborg, I agree, he does tend to be childish at times, but I would at a certain extent blame it on the youth of also the character it's himself, because he's not yet the Cyborg we know who then becomes a member of the Justice League and everything else. I mean, I believe they mentioned that he's getting there, but he's not... because obviously they pick on him saying, Batman would do this better, or why don't you call Superman, or this kind of thing. But I like the job that the actor portrays of Cyborg, and I really love the relationship between Silas and Vic. It's a very interesting relationship. It's a very multi-layered relationship, and I mean, it can sometimes come off as being an overbearing father, but you believe that he really does love his son, even though maybe at times he finds it hard to show how much he loves his son, or he finds it difficult to express his love.
Yeah, I totally agree. And very well said by both of you. I totally agree. As for me, Jane, obviously coming from the Grant Morrison comics, one of the things I was really hoping, I wasn't sure we were going to get, was the episode in the Underground, Jane Patrol, because it's actually based, and we talked about this, Jane Patrol is based on an issue by Grant Morrison and Richard Case. It was Doom Patrol Volume 2, number 30, and it's called Going Underground. And the story of the episode Jane Patrol is essentially a kind of a sort of semi-based on that comic book story. and it's my favorite comic book story of Morrison's run. I was really hoping for it because there was such a great payoff. You got a lot of information about it's interesting. We don't get a lot of details, but we kind of get to know Jane, the horrible experience she went through. We find out, it's confirmation, as we suspected in the TV series, that yes, she was sexually abused by her father, molested. And as a result, that's probably why her personality's fragmented, and as a way to cope with that trauma. And here we get, and it was so wonderfully represented in the comic by Richard Case. And here we get to see in this episode, Jane Patrol, we got to see, to go into the underground, we got to see physical representations of all those personalities inside Jane. Some look like her, like Driver 8, my favorite personality from the comic. And others don't, like Scarlet Harlot or Black Annis or whatever. Just whatever, depending on just how things are and which actress wants to play that particular role, I think. And it just did such a masterful job, and I was so happy that they did it, they adapted it, and they did it well. And I think it's my favorite episode of the entire season.
Yeah, perfect.
And as for the Chief, I knew, again, from the comics that he was a bit of a bastard. Morrison had introduced this concept that he was responsible for the Doom Patrol's creation. A little more noble. It's presented here a little bit more well-intentioned. I want to say noble, more well-intentioned, but the road to hell is obviously paved with good intentions. And in the comic, it comes out during the course of the Chief being revealed as being insane. And here it's more of like this dark secret that the Chief is trying to keep from everybody. And Mr. Nobody, in his quest to torture the Chief for reasons we still don't really know why he's so fixated on the Chief. He reveals this secret, and as intended, it basically blows up the entire apple cart. Everything that everybody knew was wrong, and all their whatever faith they still had in the Chief is completely obliterated by this point. And as a result, it makes a lot of conflict and also drives their character interactions with one another going forward. And I'm looking forward to seeing that in season 2.
Oh, yes, I think there's definitely a lot to look forward to. And I think that they really blur the lines, which is great. Because, the so-called good guys are not necessarily 100% good. They are, gods with feet of clay, as it were. While even the villains themselves are not completely evil, as it were. There is depth to them. That's why I say it's not your standard superhero fare where good is good and bad is bad, which is great, because humans are not that way. We're not entirely all good and we're not entirely all bad, I feel. So I think it humanizes the characters that much more.
And as horrible as the Chief is, and yes, he is horrible at times, he does try to look out for the team. And he's also trying to protect his daughter, as we find out, because it's ultimately revealed that Dorothy Spinner, one of the characters from Grant Morrison's run, is his daughter in this continuity. And he's trying to keep her secret because she has these vast imaginative powers and these powerful psychic powers. And he's essentially trying to protect her from the world and also the world from her. And so he again, it's well intentioned. It's just his methods, I think, are questionable about how he proceeds with that.
Yes. And they'll talk about you'll do anything to protect your children. So I get that persona, and I'm certainly not judging him. But especially. And we don't know that at the time. It makes her a very complex character, and as you said very well, Nick, he isn't somebody that you're going to embrace at all. So, yeah.
Yeah, and as for Vic, Obviously, I came, I was a fan of Cyborg because of the new Teen Titans. That's how Jesse and I got into knowing one another, was through our mutual love of the Teen Titans. So I was a little skeptical at first when they decided to make Cyborg a member of the Doom Patrol, because he hadn't been that in the comic books. He's either been with the Titans or they moved him into the Justice League when Jeff Johns and the New 52 happened in 2011. But, ultimately that set him up to be in the Justice League movie and so on. So I wasn't sure how they were going to approach it, but I like how they did it. And I like Joyvan Wade, who Jesse and I knew from Doctor Who because he played a character named Rigsy.
Yeah, that's right.
In episodes like Flatline. And he was really good in that. And Face the Raven. And so we kind of knew of him. But obviously here he's playing a much different character than Rigsy in Doctor Who, and he's very likable in the sense that he's the traditional hero, and that he's that contrast for the rest of the Doom Patrol kind of being these misfit superheroes. He's the one trying to get everybody focused and, hey, we should have meetings and go off and we'll do this and we'll battle the bad guys, and he's trying to corral. He's essentially herding cats, and all the problems ensues from that. And they have, obviously, a lot of them, especially Cliff, they butt heads with him because that's not who they are. And there's that kind of personality conflict. And ultimately, though, they all kind of learn how to coexist and respect one another and come together as a family, to the point where ultimately Vic kind of chooses the Doom Patrol over his own father. Especially after various revelations come out, especially the fact that we find out that Silas chose to save Vic over his own wife. And so essentially Silas is a little complicit in his mother's death and let Vic kind of shoulder the blame for that, which I've personally found kind of reprehensible, and I was very sympathetic toward Vic. And Jesse and I kind of got in that little debate about that, because, that whether you come from the father perspective of hey, I did this for a reason, versus the son's perspective of why did you treat me like that and let me feel that? You could have kept that. You could have told me the truth.
Yeah.
And then you wonder why I have trust issues with you.
But, kind of a callback to something Nick and no one else has heard yet, though by the time this comes out they may have.
Yeah.
Charles and I discussed earlier today Krypton. And there is a scene where the main character is unhappy.
Skaggs, yeah.
Yeah, that no spoilers because, just in case. But Adam Strange does not give him information that he thinks would be very important. And Charles and I talked about when's a good time to tell that. So I kind of feel the same thing, that Vic's dad had the same kind of, okay, when would this be a really good time to tell you this? So
but then, and my argument is, well, it's never really a good time. You just kind of have to, kind of have to rip the Band-Aid off and tell.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
but that's me. So, all around, I think there's, a lot of great, and, obviously the team comes together and, like I said, becomes this kind of misfit family. And because everybody else in their life has kind of essentially let them down or died. And so they kind of all they have are each other in this predicament that they're all in. All right. Now let's talk about our big bad. Let's talk about Alan Tudyk as Mr. Nobody. Eric Morden, we find out, is originally applied to be a member of the Brotherhood of Evil back in the day. Didn't go so well. And so he ends up becoming this insanely powerful being, Mr. Nobody, thanks to the help of Heinrich von Fuchs, a Paraguayan ex-Nazi scientist. So what's everybody's thoughts about Mr. Nobody? And we'll start with Nick.
Well, I have to say he is a brilliant villain. He absolutely is an incredible villain. And you've never seen anything quite like this, because he breaks the fourth wall, which you don't get in other shows. Usually he doesn't address, you don't have these kind of shows where the villain addresses the audience. And that's why it made me think a little bit of Deadpool when, even in the comics, where sometimes Deadpool turns to the reader and says something, and the characters look at him and say, "Who are you talking to?" He's like, "I'm talking to them," But and I think that's absolutely brilliant. But not to mention, the man's voice is incredible. I mean, he could read the phone book to me, and I'd be very happy to hear his voice, I'll tell you. And not to mention, I've yet to see this, but I know that he voices Iago in the Aladdin movie. So
Right.
I'm really looking forward to hearing how he will portray Iago, because I think he's the perfect choice for that particular character. But in general, I love the fact that not only does he break the fourth wall, but he's also as multifaceted and multidimensional as his character. Because he's not evil for evil's sake. There's more to it than that. And also the fact that he comes from a sad past himself. Always been a failure. His wife's not particularly happy with the way he's been doing things. She loses faith in him. So we can almost sympathize with him to a certain degree, because it's like the guy's been down on his luck. He decides to go not the best route to solve his problems. But, going to ex-Nazis, bro, that's probably not the best solution. But other than that, I really enjoyed him, and I think he makes for a great nemesis. And the way that him and Timothy Dalton work off each other is great. They just go. I could actually see them offset going out for a beer, because I can tell they really actually enjoy being in each other's company.
They did have really good. They have really a great on-screen chemistry, didn't they?
Exactly. And I feel that, like it often happens when you have, the good guy and the bad guy who hate each other on screen, but off screen, they're hanging out and they're the best of friends. So I kind of got that vibe from them. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed Mr. Nobody.
And what did you think, Jesse, of Mr. Nobody?
Yeah, I loved Mr. Nobody. I thought he was the best villain ever. Just so much fun. And kind of a little bit of craziness, just the right amount of weirdness. I love the joy he had when he's talking to the audience, when he kind of self-references, "Oh, finally, I've been waiting for this to get over." So yeah, he has just been perfect. He has been such a joy to watch.
Yeah, and obviously, Jesse and I, we've known Alan Tudyk because we were both Firefly fans, and and the movie Serenity, the sequel. And I knew Alan Tudyk. He did such a great job in Rogue One, a Star Wars story, as K2SO. So I knew he had such great comedic timing, and that wasn't an issue. What I loved about it, this depiction of Mr. Nobody, was that they kind of carried the character's ability to break through the fourth wall, like Nick said, and address directly to the audience. So it's almost like the audience is brought in on what Mr. Nobody's thinking. It's like, instead of just talking to himself, he's actually engaging the audience and gets you involved. So you feel like you're part of the story a little bit, because he's talking directly to you. And that's the great thing about Asides, is that it gets the viewer or the reader involved like that. And he's not your typical supervillain. Sometimes you get like you said, Deadpool. You get a hero that can kind of break through the fourth wall. David Addison on Moonlighting, and Matty Hayes, if you're a fan of that show from back in the 80s, they did a lot of fourth wall breaking. But it's very rare you get a villain to do that. And as a result, I think I made Mr. Nobody a much more unique villain. And I was glad that this character was represented so well from the comic books, again from Morrison's run. You can obviously tell that the Morrison era was obviously their heavy focus, and then everything else was kind of built around that. But as a result, it made for a great foil for the Doom Patrol, and like you said, those scenes in the white space between Timothy Dalton and Alan Tudyk, where they're just kind of the bantering back and forth and trying to outwit the other, and like manipulate the other, and it just made for some really fascinating watching.
Very much so.
Yeah, he was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, and obviously I don't think we've seen the last of him. As we finally left off in the final episode that he's trapped in this painting with the Beard Hunter, and I'm sure Jesse's not as thrilled about the Beard Hunter.
You might have some company there, Jesse.
Thank you.
So Nick, not a fan of the Beard Hunter, played by, of course, Tommy Snyder in this series.
No, let's say he's not my favorite, but
yeah. Let's talk about that. So how grossed out were you by that hairball scene where he swallows the Chief's beard hair in that bathroom scene?
You know what the bad thing was? I was actually having dinner while I was watching that episode.
Oh, horrible.
Yeah, so I there I am happily.
And it was probably something like pasta or something.
Exactly. Yes. Funnily enough, it might seem terribly stereotypical, but yes, I was having pasta, and there I was happily enjoying my the sauce that I'd taken ages to make and everything. I was like, fine, I can tuck in and enjoy. What do I have to see a guy swallowing a piece of beard? And I'm like, what? And I'm like, oh no, I've just suddenly lost my appetite. How did he put this in the fridge and eat it later? But aside from that, he just would get incredibly annoying. The way he acted and the way he carried himself, and I just really wanted somebody to punch him in the face. I'm sorry to say that, but I just really felt.
No, that's kind of the character, though. He was annoying, and he was.
I guess he did a great job because he makes himself annoying.
Yeah,
he was annoying. It means he's done his job.
Yeah, well, he did his job then, because that's kind of who he is. He was a parody of the Punisher, where instead of hunting bad guys, he goes out and hunts beards, but he sees himself as this big macho guy. But even though he's like watching like runway videos and staring at men's magazines and whatnot. So it's kind of self-deprecating, and yeah. but obviously he's not going to be everybody's cup of beard hair, I guess.
No, exactly. No, I mean, I understand.
And I respect that.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the whole parody thing, but for example, I much more preferred Willoughby Kipling as a parody to Constantine. Right. I mean, I preferred him much more. I would have gladly have seen more of Willoughby Kipling than of the Beard Hunter.
I'm sure. And hopefully we will, because he does appear in other Doom Patrol stories. So in the comics. So hopefully, yeah, let's talk about Mark Sheppard a little bit. So now that you brought him up, it's a good segue. Willoughby Kipling, obviously, we talked about this in the episode that in the comics he was created because at the time Grant Morrison wasn't allowed to use John Constantine. And so Morrison came up with this kind of version of Constantine, much more of the the offbeat magician type, much more into little strange artifacts and whatnot. And so I want to get Jesse. Let's talk about you. I know you're a big Mark Sheppard fan. Again, a lot of Doctor Who connections in this series.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so what did you think of Mark Sheppard as Willoughby Kipling?
I just loved him. I thought he was really, really perfect. Mm-hmm. The idea that we're, kind of the magic, the kind of not just doing wax on, wax off the way Doctor Strange does it in the Marvel Universe. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was actually some mechanics, kind of like
artifacts.
Yeah, the Jim Butcher, series.
Oh yeah, the Dresden Files, yes, which I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, loved that TV series, and so I think that's kind of neat to see that. And once again, Mark Sheppard is so interesting. It's always fun to see him. So yeah, that's I just was really glad to see it.
And how about you, Nick? What did you think of Mark Sheppard as Kipling?
Well, first off, it's always wonderful to see so many familiar faces from Doctor Who. I mean, because we, as you two fellow Whovians of mine, I think we felt right at home seeing all these, familiar faces from that show. But as I mentioned before, I really enjoy Constantine. I really actually enjoyed the TV series Constantine, and I'm still very much trying to recover from that show being cancelled.
Yeah. And as the former co-host of Dangerous Habits, the Constantine podcast, I'm right there with you.
I mean, I'm glad they worked him into Legends of Tomorrow, because I was so glad to see him again. And that's why I enjoyed Willoughby Kipling so much, because loving the Constantine character, at least they let this guy smoke, because they're always finding an excuse to not let Constantine smoke. I mean, let the guy smoke at least one cigarette. Come on now.
Well, actually, Matt Ryan did work in a few cigarettes here and there on the TV series. But again, that was NBC, a network TV series. Compared to DC Universe, which obviously they can get away with a lot more and be more faithful.
Yes. Exactly. No, and plus I immediately went to Constantine because, of course, the coat and, of course, the strong British accent and just
the attitude.
Exactly. I mean, it was John Constantine to a T, but even more exaggerated and even more strange. Maybe less of a punk compared to Constantine. But I really enjoyed his interaction with the characters, and I was so hoping he would stay on longer. I mean, I believe he only did 2 episodes on Doom Patrol.
Yeah, it was a 2-part storyline. Yeah, Cult Patrol and Paw Patrol, the 4th and 5th episodes of the season.
And I really, really hope they'll bring him back for season 2, because he was really one of the really cool recurring characters. And plus, as even Jesse was saying, it's always wonderful to see this guy. I mean, I enjoyed him in The Impossible Astronaut and in Day of the Moon, of course, from Doctor Who. So whenever he's on screen, it's always a pleasure to see him.
Yeah, like I said, Grant Morrison did a couple more storylines with him, including he's a major player in Morrison's final epic storyline during his run. So we should hopefully see him again. Fingers crossed, as long as Mark Shepard's schedule holds up.
Good.
Maybe with Supernatural ending, maybe that'll help out a little bit too. Yeah. Hopefully. So, so more Mark Shepard is always a good thing, and I kind of enjoyed seeing him because he plays, compared to Matt Ryan's Constantine, Shepard's Kipling seems to have a little bit more mileage on him. He's kind of been a little bit more around the block, so he's kind of a little bit more jaded, if that's possible, than Constantine. And that comes through, I think, in his performance. And he makes it much more sardonic, and he's got a lot of great lines and snappy comebacks with everybody. It was a lot of fun. All right, let's talk about some other characters. Let's talk about Darren Jones and the Bureau of Normalcy, because they're kind of some significant players, especially as we dive into Larry's backstory when he was a prisoner of the ant farm. And so, Jesse, what did you think of Darren Jones and the introduction of this group, this Bureau of Normalcy that is essentially out? Their mission is to wipe out all things abnormal and exterminate them.
Yeah, they were an interesting, bad guy. Mm-hmm. I would have. I don't know if I wanted it. I guess my problem, and not really a problem, is the a little too close to home sometimes with the amount of prejudice and the amount of people trying to fight against what's the quote-unquote unnatural. So right. I think it was a great villain, but I think if anything, that's what bothered me a little bit, is that, this is hitting a little too close to home. It is
a bit, disturbingly relevant to our times right now.
Well said, Charles, exactly. It's very relevant. Yes.
Yeah. And how about you, Nick? What did you think of the Bureau of Normalcy?
I cannot but echo Jesse's words, because I have to say it is very much a representation of the unfortunate, tumultuous political times we're going through and the ideas that are being perpetrated. And it's very sad to see certain ideas returning to where if it is different, it is considered evil. And I suppose I probably feel this myself. Look, being Jewish, I feel this a lot even more so. And that's why maybe it was a little bit disturbing for me to see this Bureau of Normalcy, because those kind of images immediately came to my head, of
Right.
fascism, of, if you are not like, in such and such a way, you are slightly different, or you profess a different religion, or just that. And I mean, I think that's why maybe it was so disturbing and just almost so creepy, because of that fact that it so mirrors society today and the political regimes that we are seeing throughout the world, unfortunately. So, but it was brilliant. It was very good, and I think it was also a good social commentary as well, because I believe these shows do need to do that, maybe without hammering it too hard, but saying, wake up, people, this is what is going on. Obviously, they took it to the extreme in this case, but I think I think they're trying to leave a message of, this is what's going on. You don't want to get to the point of where there is this situation. So I appreciate it more than anything for that.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot of criticism because, not you personally, hopefully, but that the show will get criticism because, yes, they're addressing certain political topics, and that a lot of people, they don't want to see that in their entertainment. And God forbid, yes, they actually are taught something about society and are asked to think, question what's going on in their society. And that's kind of what Doom Patrol does here, but I don't think they beat you over the head with it.
Exactly.
It's just more, they kind of more focus on the repercussions of it and how it affects everyday people, whether you view them as everyday people or not. It's people, living people, breathing people that are just trying to go about their day, live their lives, and just want to live a life of happiness and acceptance. And unfortunately, there's people out there that don't want that to happen, unfortunately. And when Morrison created Darren Jones, and then he created this group called the Men from Nowhere, which in the TV series became the Bureau of Normalcy, and the Ant Farm. He came out of the times, he was coming out of the 80s with the Thatcher era and in the UK. And, there's a lot of conservative voices that tried to stamp out homosexuality and anything unusual, different. And sadly, what he wrote in the early 1990s is still plaguing us here as we approach 2020. And it's
you
kind
think
of
we would have
it's
evolved by then?
You would think. And we started to, and then we hit a really bad backslide. I think what it did, especially with the election of Trump in 2016, this is just me speaking, that it kind of like kicked over a rock, and all the roaches and bugs and evil things just crawled out from under that rock that were already there, and they spread out into the world and in the spotlight, and they're having their moment in the sun. And then it's kind of up to everyone to kind of take a stand against that and hopefully drive them back under the rock for a good while.
One of the other podcasts I listen to is the West Wing Weekly, and where they are going through each episode of the West Wing, which is 8-9 years old. And some of the episodes are still so relevant today. Talking about immigration, talking about social justice. So yes, it is, and I like your image of it. You knock over that rock, and all of a sudden these creepy crawly things go together. So and I want to stress your point is really well said. They did not beat us over the head. I know some people feel like the latest season of Supergirl was too on the nose and kind of beating a social
in
justice.
Your face. Yeah.
I didn't feel so, but I understand those people who do. So this doesn't at all.
Especially for a network show.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I think it's just that that was pretty much a lot in the 60s. Remember, you had shows like The Twilight Zone and The Outer Limits and all this that challenged you. and tried to get you to think differently, or at least expand your ideology a little bit and get you to think. And that fell out of favor at some point. I'm not sure when, probably during the 80s. And it's struggled ever since to kind of come back, so that when people try to bring out those ideas, story concepts that push those boundaries and get you to think, then it's like all of a sudden you have an agenda, as opposed to just like, well, no, I'm just trying to get you to think about stuff. And some people view it that way, some people don't. And that's the kind of battle that creative types face, I think.
Yeah.
Very true. I mean, but at the same time, I think that is what we want, because I think, you're hoping that your audience is intelligent, and you don't want to have to, down talk to your audience. And I think you want them to think, regardless of the subject matter you're dealing with, be it a political show, be it a superhero show, be it anything. I think it's important if there is a takeaway, if there is a moral lesson, or if there is something that, once you finish the show, once you've read that comic book, whatever, there is a takeaway. There is something that you can close the book or turn the TV off and say, wow, that really made me think. And I think that is good storytelling, and it's more profound. I mean, rather than have a show that's just wallpaper, you want something that is a little more engaging, I feel. Granted, it might clash with certain people's ideologies, but at the end of the day, one could even say then that it's not a show for you. You can watch something else that might be more more close to your ideology.
Right. And I think it's a credit to Doom Patrol that what, a lot of people may come into this going, well, hey, this is like a weird superhero show. I'll check this out. And they could have just phoned it in, but they didn't.
Exactly.
They addressed some rather, think about the stuff they talk about here in this series, just this first season. They're talking about coming out and acceptance of homosexuality. They're talking about mental illness and dissociative identity disorder. They're talking about sexual harassment. We get that with Rita a lot, with the directors and the casting couch storylines. We get trust issues. We get
child abuse.
Child abuse, exactly.
Yeah.
Obviously with Crazy Jane and her father, exactly. That's a big one that a lot of people just, they get a little nervous when you start bringing that up. But I think it's important to talk about stuff like that, because that's how you confront it and you face it, and you can't deal with it if you're constantly running from it.
Exactly. And I think it also gives value to these shows, because you might have people who say, superheroes shows are just about, bam, smack, pow, the good guy wins,
right,
walks into the sunset with the girl and everything else. And I think it also helps give these shows more credit. They're like, it is a superhero show, but it's more to it than just that. And I think we need that also to give value to what maybe in the eyes of a few might be seen as child's fare.
Right.
Something very safe and without any kind of
consequence.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Jesse, anything you'd like to add?
No.
Okay.
No, this is well said.
Yeah, he's probably like, you guys are getting way too over my head.
No,
here,
I agree. Yeah.
Okay, we didn't want to get too deep into the woods, I guess. All right, let's see, some other characters we could probably talk about. Flex Mentallo, which is a fun character that gets introduced late in the series, I think. He's also a character created by Morrison, surprise, played by David Chandler Long. And Jesse and I talked about how Flex was a kind of throwback to like the old Charles Atlas, make a man out of Mac ads, where you had the guy that was getting his sand kicked in his face by this bully at the beach, and he takes the Charles Atlas program and he's able to sock the bully in the jaw and get the girl, and he's the hero of the beach in the comic book ads back in the day,
right.
Way back in the day. And Morrison was a fan of those and created this character Flex Mentallo as a tribute to that. So I know what Jesse's thinking about Flex. Nick, what did you think about Flex?
I really enjoyed every time Flex Mentallo was on screen.
The man of muscle mystery.
Exactly. And I think it was also great because it was a contrast to the Doom Patrol team members,
Right.
Because the fact that they are so dysfunctional, they all have their issues, and they either are disfigured or they have these kind of problems. And here comes this guy, who's
this perfect looking guy, yeah,
exactly, handsome, muscle bound, what have you. And he maybe portrays the idea of being more of the, shall we say, inverted commas, run of the mill superhero, as in incredibly buff, handsome, and all the girls are fawning over him. And
right.
I think it was fun also for that reason, and also the fact that he is so good natured. There's nothing that will irritate the guy. When you see Robot Man trying to get a rise out of him, there's just no way he could do it to jog his memory. And it's almost, and it frustrates him to such a point where the guy destroys the TV. And I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, that seemed like, that seemed the only thing that really bothered him is like, I can't watch my soap opera.
Exactly. Like, he takes that very serious.
Yeah, and I love that. I think Devin Chandler Long did such a great job of portraying him.
Mm-hmm.
And because you could have just played him straight as a straight strong man, and that was it. But I think he also gave him charm, and the fact that he is kind of almost so peace loving and such. I really, really loved him, and I thought it was a great contrast to kind of the gloom and doom we had, no pun intended, in the Doom Patrol itself.
Yeah, and there was that great hilarious scene in Penultimate Patrol, the 14th episode of the season, where Flex is trying to get the team into white space.
Yeah.
And he gives everybody in town a collective orgasm. And just when you thought you had seen everything to see on this show by this point, that scene happened to the tune of Eric Carmen's All By Myself was hilarious, in my opinion. I laughed so hard at that scene.
Yes, absolutely.
It was insane. Yeah, but it's true. You thought you had seen everything.
And you're just watching this going, I can't believe they went there. Mm-hmm. I can't believe they did this. And and I'm thinking it's fantastic that they went there. I was so happy. I rolled with laughter at that.
Brilliant.
And that kind of reminds me of Danny the Street. We should probably talk about our sentient transvestite teleporting street, Danny. Again, another comic character from Morrison's run. Now, Jesse obviously had no idea of Danny going in, but I think that he liked Danny as a character. I love
Danny. I was so happy. The comparison of the Bureaucracy of Normal and Danny the Street. Everything has to be normal. We have no room for anything outlandish. We're going to just scrape, Cliff because he's an outdated robot, to acceptance to everyone, no matter where you're at. I mean, I liked the Beard Hunter as he was there on the street. That
Danny even made the Beard Hunter tolerable.
Yes, and just and
that's the power of behold the power of Danny.
How creative is it that the idea that this object has a personality and is so accepting and loving? It's just great.
Yeah, it's very positive, and one of the great things I think about Danny is that he is such a positive force. It's not like I told Jesse, there's no ulterior motive with Danny. No. What you see is what you get. He cares about the Dannyzens, the people that he's kind of collected during his travels, adventures, whatever you want to call it, and they found a home on Danny, and as a result, he looks over them. He's without having any ulterior motive, he's protective of them, and just wants them to give them a safe haven, a safe space, if you will.
Yeah.
And I thought that was great. So, Nick, what did you think about Danny?
I totally agree with Jesse when he says the concept is just absolute genius, because there's never been anything like the fact of a disembodied, entity, but which is actually a street, and
it could go anywhere.
Exactly. Not to mention the fact that through words you could feel the emotion. It's so weird because there
Like
was
street signs and like, you know, inflatable guys and
exactly
whatnot.
all the neon lights,
Right.
street signs, etc. But the fact that when Danny showed disappointment or sadness, I have to admit I actually felt myself tearing up, and it was just words. And I think that is how potent that character was and how well it was portrayed. The fact that I could actually feel when, Danny was happy or angry or upset, to where, for example, when Flex Mentallo shows up, he's like, Flex, how are you doing and everything. I could actually feel, just by the way the text came out, the guy was genuinely excited to see him. And it blew my mind because I actually had to check myself saying, you do realize you're reacting to words, and I think that was the genius about it because it was just something so different and the concept just so original. Yeah, definitely we have to have more of Danny as well because it's such an incredible character and it's such a powerful one that and it's a great, as Jesse was saying, it's a great opposition to the Bureau of Normalcy as well. So I loved it totally.
Excellent. All right. Probably should start wrapping things up. Is there any other characters anybody wants to talk about, like that I missed, like Ezekiel the Cockroach, or Animal Vegetable Mineral Man, or Admiral Whiskers?
The Animal Mineral Vegetable Man was just so silly that kind of won off, and they continue to see it. I would love to see Cliff's daughter back next season.
Mm-hmm. Clara, yeah.
Yeah, Clara.
Played by Bethany Ann Lind.
Yeah,
a great
great. A lot of good supporting characters. And really looking forward to next season.
All right, Nick, how about you? Any other characters you want to talk about?
Well, though I guess we probably won't see more of him, I really enjoyed what we saw of Von Fuchs as well.
The whole Heinrich von Fuchs, Fuchtopia.
Exactly, the puppets and just the general creepiness of that world. It was brilliant, and the way he was portrayed, I absolutely love that, and I know we probably won't see him again, but it was amazing. And very rarely do I get sort of skin crawl when I sort of watch these kind of shows, but I was genuinely creeped out when I saw the curtain being unveiled and him being in the little sort of box or whatever it was.
Yeah, kind of an iron, almost like an iron lung.
Exactly, in the iron lung. I was like, wow, this is seriously disturbing. I love it because it's that disturbing that I actually enjoy it. So yeah, I will. That's one of my, should we say, honorable mentions.
All right, that's good. And one of the things that whole sequence, I think it teased a little bit of why Mr. Nobody has an issue with the chief, is that we find out that the chief had showed up at Von Fuchs's door at one point and shot Von Fuchs. At least that's the story we're presented through puppetry. Yeah. But we don't know much more than that, and maybe we'll get more in season 2, hopefully, on that. They kind of left that one hanging, I thought.
No, exactly. So hopefully we'll get more of it because it was an interesting story, and plus I think we want to know what the deal is. Why Mr. Nobody hates him so much, or why he has this animosity towards the chief.
Yeah, I think there's still some material there to be mined, at least for whenever Mr. Nobody returns on Doom Patrol.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So anything else anybody's looking forward to on season 2? Hopefully.
Well, Jesse, do you have any? Are there any things you're looking forward to particularly?
I'm kind of curious to see where they're going to go. I hope they do not, and I would be shocked if they turned into a more standard superhero show. I don't see that in their DNA. I'd like to know more about Jane's personas. I'd like to see, the relationships between the 4 continue to advance. I'm curious to see the chief's daughter and where that is.
Yeah, well, obviously we're going to get more of Dorothy Spinner, I'm sure. And they'll probably, now that they'll have to cast somebody, I know we kind of got her teased, but from the back, and so you couldn't see her face, and we'll see. But we'll see who they cast for that role.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking we're gonna, and we talked about this. That I'm hoping that we'll get to see a proper Brotherhood of Evil.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to see the Brain and Monsieur Mala from the original Brotherhood of Evil. They kind of teased them a little bit, both of them, by mentioning them and whatnot. I think we'll get to see maybe another classic Doom Patrol villain from the 60s, General Immortus, who I think is going to be connected to the Immortus Project, and we'll probably find out some more information about the Chief's efforts in his quest for immortality, to learn more about that so that he could stay alive, so that he could protect Dorothy and keep her safe.
Good.
So I'm seeing, and I'm personally, as a Morrison fan, I'm hoping we'll see, because there's plenty more weird Doom Patrol villains from Morrison's run left in the box. So I want to see Mr. Nobody create his Brotherhood of Dada, and I want to see Red Jack, who is essentially a version of Jack the Ripper that Morrison came up with, and I want to see the ultimate big bad of the maybe like a season 3 or so. The Candlemaker, who's like the kind of the big bad of Morrison's final story run in Doom Patrol, who's a really nasty piece of work. So we'll see, and that's just kind of my personal hopes. So we'll see. All right. Anything else about this first season before we kind of wrap up here?
No, I can't think of anything.
All right. Nick, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I would say I think we pretty much have said everything that needs to be said. I was 100% satisfied with this first season. Really looking forward to season 2, and I'm sure it'll be just as good, and I'm sure they'll surprise us just as much as they did on this first run around.
So I think we're all probably kind of general consensus that this season was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, absolutely.
And better than anybody expected.
Yeah, and I think you had. I think I was the most surprised compared to you, that because I just was going in there with no expectation, and I think you are just so surprised that, oh my goodness, I can't believe they're doing this. I am getting Danny the Street on TV.
I think you were coming up with no expectations, and I'm coming out with from the approach that my expectations were met and exceeded in a lot of ways,
which is amazing, because I knew how much you love his writing, and you have a soft place in your heart for the storyline. So
he's one of my major influences as a writer.
Yeah.
So in this run was as a writer, it helped form a lot of how I write my stories and approach things and characters and whatnot. So Nick, how about you? Are you kind of like with Jesse, that it kind of, you didn't expect much going in, and it kind of blew you away a little bit?
Well, I will say yes, because not having so much background knowledge on the Doom Patrol, I really didn't know what to expect. It really was a total surprise. I didn't know what I'd be getting into, and it was just an incredible gift, I have to say, just because the fact that I couldn't really say there's anything like this on TV at the moment, because it's just so different from anything else I've seen. And so I definitely was incredibly happy, and it made me want to say, once the last episode was over, is I can't wait for season 2 to roll around.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So does it make you want to go back and actually check out more Grant Morrison comics of Doom Patrol?
That for sure. That was actually on my to-do list. Once I finished this, I said to myself, now I'm going to go, just as I did the Doctor Who marathon from 63 to 2018.
Oh, nice.
I'm going to do the same thing with this.
Well, you got Doom Patrol
Very
Volume 2, number 19 through 63 to read. So that's like 44 comics right there. So plenty for you to sit back and enjoy. And I hardly recommend picking up the big brick, the Doom Patrol omnibus, that could probably kill somebody if you wanted to with it, because it's so ridiculously heavy. But highly recommended. So anybody looking for some Doom Patrol to kind of get them through the off season, obviously I definitely recommend going on DC. You can go on DC Universe, because hey, you're already paying for the service, so you might as well read the comics, right? And checking those out. And it weighs a lot less than the brick omnibus. I'll say
Absolutely.
that. Your iPad's a little lighter than that. All right. Titans Tower news before we sign off. Just real quick, I just kind of wanted to mention that Jesse and I, because with Doom Patrol ending, and it's probably going to be a little while before Titans Season 2, that he and I are we're going to kind of close up shop temporarily on Titan Talk. Hopefully we'll be back around October, I'm guessing, for Season 2. But in the meantime, he and I are going to be talking Krypton Season 2 on another podcast for the Southgate Media Group, the Fandom Zone podcast, which I've mentioned here and there. And Karen Lindsay and I used to do that podcast. We ended that kind of in November 18 when Karen sadly has had some health problems. As some of you know, she's been going through MS and a horrible condition. And she's having some issues with her medication, and she's also having some technology issues. So Jesse has been kind enough to agree to join me there on Phantom Zone, and we'll talk Krypton for probably the next 10 weeks or so. And then we'll probably come right back for Titan Season 2 when that picks up in October. So I think that should work out great. So hopefully I'm asking if you enjoy Jesse and I, what we do here, please check us out on Phantom Zone Podcast. We just recorded our Krypton Season 1 review earlier today, and that's going to be episode 153 of the Phantom Zone, and hopefully we'll get that posted shortly within the coming week. And in the meantime, Jesse, is there anything you'd like to add about our taking on Krypton?
Yeah, I really think we if you haven't watched Krypton, I think it's definitely worth it. Sci-Fi Channel replayed it, but since you have DC Universe, you can watch them online, and then Sci-Fi Channel coming up, as we were talking about this week, will be the new season.
Right.
Definitely works. It's a great series, and they've done some creative things. Coming up on, you can hear Charles and I talk about Doctor Who. You can even Nick's join them.
Next Up Everywhere.
Yes, Next Up Everywhere. Yes.
Yeah, we talked The Enemy of the World, and hopefully we'll be getting that up shortly.
Yes.
So,
good times.
Absolutely.
That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that, Nick. So yeah. So if you enjoy Nick's work, check us out on Next Stop Everywhere that Jesse and I also do for Southgate Media. And Jesse, where else can they reach you on the interwebs?
So I am still doing Set Listing Bruce, the Bruce Springsteen podcast I do. We are. I'm back recording new episodes. So we're up to over 300 episodes from fans around the world. And once again, DJ Nik was nice enough to join me and talk about his musical journey. So that was a lot of fun. You can find me on Twitter at Jesse Jackson DFW. You can find me on Facebook under Louisville, Texas, if you want to search, because there are more than one Jesse Jackson. Charles, where can they find you?
Well, they can find me, of course, at Charles Skaggs on the Twitter machine or at Charles Skaggs on Instagram. Definitely appreciate that. Facebook, of course, Charles Skaggs in Hilliard, Ohio. Or my blog of geeky things, if that'll work. Come on.
Damn good coffee and hot.
Damn good coffee and hot, where I talk about all the stuff we talk about here on Titan Talk. All kinds of Titans, Doom Patrol news, DC Universe, news of my other podcasts I do for Southgate Media, including, of course, Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast, the Fandom Zone podcast that we're now doing with Jesse as we talk Krypton, and, of course, Ghostwood, the Twin Peaks podcast that I do with Zan Sprouse, wife of comic book artist Chris Sprouse, where we talk about all things Twin Peaks, David Lynch, etc., etc. So if you enjoy talking those topics, if you're kind of that offbeat Doom Patrol, quirky kind of person, you kind of dig that stuff, please check us out on Ghostwood. And Nick, where can they find you and all of your wonderful work?
To use the musical segue there, if you are fans of country music, be it traditional or today's country music, you can catch us on the Whiskey and Cigarettes Show. To do that, all you have to do is visit our website. That's whiskeyandcigarettesshow.com. That will link you to all our social media and where you can tune into the show, be it FM, AM, or net.
Excellent. So now, please do that, everybody, because Nick's obviously great. He has a lot of great insights, and we just love talking to him. And he's so kind and always has such wonderful things to say about us, even though we're not paying him for that. So somehow I don't know how that works out. I mean, I keep expecting having to write a check at some point.
I was waiting for the PayPal transfer. It hasn't come through yet.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Maybe, or if you're waiting for the EFT, maybe we'll do electronic fund transfer. Yeah.
No, but it's always a pleasure,
You take PayPal?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, PayPal always works.
All
nice
right.
and easy. Yeah, but thanks again for having me on, guys. It's always a pleasure to talk anything with you because you are both excellent hosts and you're so passionate about what you do. So I definitely always have a great time.
All right. So in the meantime, if you want to keep in touch with us here on Titan Talk, of course, you can reach us on Twitter at Titan Talk Cast or on Facebook at Titan Talk, the Titans Podcast. And you can drop us a line if you want, titantalkcast@gmail.com, because even though we may not be recording episodes for a while, still going to get the emails, and we can save them up over the summer and until we get back and to talk about them. So you reach us at titantalkcast@gmail.com. Otherwise, we'll probably just I'll probably try to work in an episode of Young Justice Outsiders Part 2 with Phil Parrish from the Capes and Lunatics podcast, where he and I will be talking the back half of Young Justice Outsiders and episodes 14 through 26. But other than that, we'll just come back in October and we'll talk Titan Season 2 and what looks to be an interesting adaptation, hopefully, of the Judas contract in Titan Season 2, which they still need to wrap up the Trigon storyline, though.
Yeah.
So you got a lot to do, guys, and hopefully you're up to the task this time. So Doom Patrol's raised the bar really, really high.
It really has, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. So Titans, time to step your game up, as we like to say. You got a lot to do. You got a lot to make up for, I think, for that first season. So hopefully you can get on track, and Doom Patrol hopefully showed you how to do it.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So Nick, once again, thank you for joining us. You're always welcome to join us whenever we have a podcast, and we love talking to you. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you both so much for your time, and as I said, it's ever a pleasure to spend the time talking to you and shooting the breeze over the shows we love so much.
Excellent. And Jesse, any final words before we sign off?
Just thank you, Nick. Thank you, Charles. It's always a joy talking to you guys. And I agree. Nick, just anytime you've got something you want to share, I'll throw you on Set Listing Bruce, and we'll have fun talking music, okay?
Always a good time. Yes, indeed. Thank you.
All right. So
deal.
Everybody, thanks again for listening to us here at Titan Talk. Like I said, we'll be talking maybe Young Justice Outsiders a little bit, and then we'll be back hopefully in October for Titan Season 2. So we'll see you next time, and thank you for listening to Titan Talk, the Titans podcast. Goodbye, everybody.